Back to our lead story. This has been the case really throughout the entire week. Hurricane Milton quickly moving into the Atlantic Ocean on Thursday after sweeping across Florida. And more than 2 million people without power now. And we had seen more than 100 tornado warnings stemming from this particular storm. Well, we have seen multiple people die from the storm and hundreds of water rescues occurring, according to officials. As we examine the toll and look to other potential storms on the horizon, I do want to bring in ICE meteorologist Dave Margolin with more. Dave, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Krista.
What is the aftermath that we see of Milton this Friday morning?
Yeah, so recovery is in full effect now. We've seen outages across the region. This time yesterday, I think it was about 3.3 million. We're down to 2.5 million, so that's certainly a good story, but there is still a long ways to go. Some more good news. I believe the airport in Tampa was scheduled to reopen just about now. The story is still mixed. The port of Tampa, for example, they're still doing assessment. We've talked about, I think, the last couple of days how important it is because it brings in so much petroleum. And I think as you go across sort of the rural inland areas of Florida, too, those are more difficult areas to kind of get into. And the efforts there are going to take longer in terms of getting business operations back up to normal.
And those residents, of course, of Tampa fearing the worst, that a storm surge would cause intense flooding. But we actually saw the opposite effect, almost a reverse surge, sucking water away from Tampa. Why was that?
Yeah, so Tampa in particular was extremely fortunate, Tampa Bay. We were worried, a lot of the meteorologists were worried that they could see sort of that catastrophic worst case scenario. But what happened is that the storm ended up making landfall about 40 or 50 miles south of Tampa. Near Sarasota. That may not seem like a lot, but it's really important when it comes to storm surge, because when you think about a tropical cyclone, the winds blow counterclockwise. So the fact that the storm came into the south and the winds were blowing offshore meant that Tampa Bay was spared. And Tampa Bay in particular is extremely vulnerable because with the storm surge, it's not just about the intensity of the storm, but it's about the sort of the configuration of the water near that location. And with Tampa, you have the offshore waters are relatively shallow, and Tampa Bay acts sort of like a funnel. So that area in particular is one of the sort of most vulnerable places in America for a strong storm surge.
Mm-hmm. Is it normal for a hurricane of this magnitude to lead to as many tornadoes as we saw stem from this?
No, it isn't. That was a surprise, I think, for most of the meteorologists, myself included. Normally when you think about kind of scenarios for a lot of tornadic activity, you think about Oklahoma, Texas. And one of the ingredients here, one of the main ingredients, is that clash of cold coming down from Canada and the warmth and the moisture coming in from the south. Well, you don't normally have those kinds of ingredients with a hurricane. So the fact that we saw over 100 tornadic warnings, I think there was about 50 reports of actual tornadoes, or 40 or 50 or so, was extremely unusual. And the truth is, we're scientists like myself, we're going to have to look into that and try to understand what happened with this particular situation.
Walk us through the numbers, Dave, of course, associated with these deadly destructive tornadoes, on top of what we've seen with the hurricane.
Yeah, so predominantly, or the majority of the tornadoes were sort of to the south and east of the storm. And that's pretty typical. So we saw across southern Florida, southeastern Florida, again, there were over 100 warnings that were issued, which I believe is one of the highest we've ever seen in Florida's history for any day. And there were reports of about 50, and unfortunately, there were somewhere around 6 to 8 casualties associated with it. So again, extremely unusual, and unfortunately at this point, we really don't understand why this hurricane produced so many tornadoes.
Based on your models, do you anticipate that we'll see more storms on the horizon?
Yeah, that's obviously a really important question, especially for residents of Florida who have now been through 2 hurricanes. The short answer is, for residents of the Gulf Coast, you still have to pay close attention, monitor those hurricane center forecasts here, I would say, at least into early mid-November. Why is that? Because even in a normal season, you would still expect maybe 1 or 2 more hurricanes before the end of the season. But this isn't a normal season, right? This is a season of above normal activity. We've already seen it. We're expecting to see above normal activity into November. In addition to that, some of the hurricane models, the forecast models that we have for next week, are showing the potential for more activity in the Caribbean Sea. So, for all these factors, I would say, again, if you're a resident on the Gulf Coast, especially eastern Gulf Coast, please pay attention to the forecast.
I know, Dave, you've been looking at the data so closely as our in-house ICE meteorologist. Anything else our viewers should know when it came to data storylines emerging from this particular storm?
Well, I think, some of the things you already touched on here. We have to try to understand why we saw so much tornadic activity. That was not one of the expected impacts that we thought we'd see. The other thing, of course, is always with the track and intensity forecast, right? Although I think from a high level view, you can say the forecasts were good. We did see some surprises in terms of the intensity. First, initially, how strong it got, and then the weakening near shore. And then, of course, that final track forecast, which shifted a little bit further south. So these are all things that I think we're going to be looking at and trying to improve over the coming years.
Give our viewers a sense of your day-to-day as ICE's in-house meteorologist. What exactly does it entail?
Lots of data, I would
Yes.
say, to start with. So, in our ICE platform, ICE Connect platform here, we focus on two areas, the historics and the forecast. So we've got data going back 30 plus years, global data for over 6,000 locations. We're always working on updating that. And then there's the forecast. We've got the various different global models that users can use, both in terms of data and maps to assess variables across the surface and all the way up to the stratosphere.
And I heard that there's actually some snow, early signs of snow, believe it or not, here in the Northeast. What is the data showing on that front?
It is hard to believe we're talking about snow after this week, but there has been the first sort of accumulating snow for the snow lovers out there in some of the higher peaks in New England. So it's a little bit of harbinger of things to come for those ski lovers up there.
Can we expect a warmer winter or a colder winter than expected this year?
Two thoughts on that. So most of the forecasts that are out there right now are suggesting that we are going to see an above normal temperature year. So for snow lovers, that's not great to hear. But the seasonal forecasting is still a very difficult sort of and low confidence kind of forecast. So despite the fact that the forecasts are warm, I would say, again, as we get closer, we'll know more in terms of what to expect.
Okay, Dave Margolin, thank you so much for joining, of course, our in-house ICE meteorologist expert. We appreciate that, Dave.